Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our poppy field tutorial inspired by the wonderful Wizard of Oz. We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Hello.
And we are going to be doing this project in 5 steps. So, our very first step is we're going to do a light sketch, and then we'll put in our sky and our road. Our second step is we are going to do the right side of our poppy field. Our third step is we will do the left side of our poppy field. The fourth step is we will do kind of our emerald city hill area. And then our very last step are finishing details on the flowers and this really pretty little ring that we have going on there. We will be using, how many colors? 5 colors. Our very first color is deep yellow. Our second color is deep blue. Our third color is pine green. Our fourth color is fuchsia. And our last color is black. So we're going to be doing a lot of color mixing here. And I have 3 paint brushes. I have a round 2, a round 6, and a 1-inch wash. These are our go-to brushes. 2 and 6 are probably what we use the most. So if you're just starting out, I would highly suggest starting with a round 2 and a round 6. And then as you do more projects or do more like larger pieces of work, that's where like a 1-inch wash or a larger round comes in handy. I also have a pencil for sketching. I cut my paper in half and I taped it off using our Holbein soft tape, which is my favorite tape. Premium tape. Did I already introduce Keenan?
Yeah, no, yeah, oh, I've been here. Good? I've been here for a while.
You're like, I actually designed that project.
See that mat? I made that too.
I have water, and make sure when you paint on your paper that you do it on the more textured side. And by more textured, like both of them have a little bit of a texture. The side you're supposed to paint on, the texture goes out, where the back side, the texture seems to go in. Oh. If that's helpful.
That makes sense.
These are fake glasses, by the way. Okay.
No one would have known.
I just have to acknowledge it. They're not real. I don't even have glasses in them.
Accidentally poke your eye.
Okay, there's no outline with this. So I think that we can do our oath and then we will start our project. Oh, and just as a little information, our theme this month is book club, which yes. I'm so excited about. So all of the projects coming up that you'll see are inspired by works of literature. And I can't describe to you the amount of fun that I had doing this box, while simultaneously how difficult it was for me to choose projects, because I love to read. I'm an avid reader and have been like since I was little, and so like trying to pick these projects, I'm like, we can do this one, we can do this one. So I hope that I gave you like a full breadth of different types of literature, and maybe some that you can connect to and some that maybe you won't. Maybe you'll discover a new book along this way. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like this is just the start of where we could go with this theme. And I just love it so much. So I'm really excited to do this box with you guys, and I hope you have the best time with it. And I hope that it just inspires you to, like, what book are you reading right now? Or do you know when you're reading something and you come across a passage that is so descriptive, or reading a book that is so otherworldly that you're just like trying to imagine it in your head, and you start creating these pictures, and then how fun would it be to just like try and explore that, and you know, try and communicate the feelings that you had while reading it, or, you know, like just take one little paragraph of text and paint. Actually, one of my favorite exercises that I took in a beginning art class was our art teacher. She read a poem that had very descriptive language, and we just painted. It was just like, there was like 8 lines, so she read the poem, and then we just like painted whatever we like saw in our head.
Whoa.
And they were all different from each other, and it was just fascinating. I mean, it wasn't so descriptive of like a willow tree, you know, like it wasn't like that. It was a little bit more abstract, but so fun. Just a really wonderful exercise.
That'd be a sweet exercise.
It was so fun. I loved it. And actually, that painting, my bonus father fell in love with it. Like he saw it, he was like, can I buy that? I'm like, Dad, you can just have that. And that always just meant something to me. He just was so excited about that painting. And I feel like it was the first time that he just like loved my work without it, you know, like it was such a weird painting too. And he just loved it and he took it. But
that's cool.
Anyways, okay. Now let's get to painting. So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
Promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you so much. Now we are going to sketch. I have a pencil here. You can use whatever pencil you want. You can use a watercolor pencil. Those are really nice because they blend out when you add water to them. But if you want the shape to stay, even when you do washes, then you do not want to use a watercolor pencil. And so basically I'm just going to do kind of a horizon line, just light.
Nice.
And then for our road, I kind of want it to go across the composition because I feel like that creates movement. It creates more interesting composition. So I'm going to have it start on the left and then just kind of go to the right. And you can decide how angled you want it to be. Like if you want it to be more like this angle, you can. You want it to be more extreme. Just know that wherever it starts over here, it's going to be wider. And then as it gets to the end, it's going to thin out. And that's how we communicate depth.
Question.
Yeah.
When it came to doing a sideways angled road, did you find that it was easier than a straight on path?
Like if I were to do a path just like this?
Yeah.
I guess I feel like for me, I wanted the subject and the main thing that we're painting to be about the poppies. And I feel like that if I did a painting that was probably like up on its side and the road was like this.
Yes.
Which would work with perspective. That's a single point perspective right here. And it would end right here. I feel like then the painting would be about the yellow brick road instead of the poppies.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I wanted there to be a hint of it to like hint at the story, but the main thing here is are these red poppies in this field. So, and I want it to be all encompassing too. So I want that to be the largest element on my painting. That's a great question.
Cool.
So then
Thank
if
you.
you were to like try and create your own paintings from stories, think about what is it that you're trying to emulate and capture? Is that the biggest, like the main subject within your painting? Or if it's not, what are you putting in there? Does it distract or help? You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay. And that's all I'm gonna draw. That's it. Okay?
Got it.
I'm gonna start with doing my sky. So I'm gonna use my 1-inch wash. I'm gonna grab a little bit of this deep blue and I'm gonna add water to it to lighten it up. I just want a light blue sky. So I'm gonna take this blue, and sometimes people don't know this, but you can add water to your colors on your palette to make a lighter value instead of just doing it in your brush, okay?
Yes.
So it's not like I picked up blue and then just dumped my brush, which I
got it.
could. If you want to see what the color will be or the value will be before you put it on your paper, then you just add water to your palette and mix it on your palette, okay?
Okay.
And then I'm just gonna start by putting in the color. And if you have a darker value, I usually try and keep it at the top when I do skies. And I'm gonna do it a little bit darker. And then you add water as you work your way down to get a lighter value. So there's just a slight shift in darkness to lightness. And then you can decide how strong in color you want it to be. I'm gonna go a little bit darker so you guys can see. But at the horizon line, which is where our sky meets our ground, that should be a barely there color, okay? All right, now we're gonna move to our round 6, and I'm gonna put in my yellow road. So I'm just gonna take this yellow, and then I'm just gonna start putting it in.
I love how light that sky is.
It's nice, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
like a little hint of blue.
This is weird. It makes me think of a light salad.
A salad?
Yeah, you know, like how sometimes you're just feeling like a light salad? Sometimes you don't need a dark blue sky.
Oh, yes.
Does that make sense? Sometimes you're just feeling fresh.
Sometimes you just want a little something.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am just doing a light wash right now, and then as we go towards the end, I will probably do another wash with a little bit of fuchsia in there to give it some warmth, because this is feeling very, very yellow, right? Where if I want it to feel almost like orange yellow, I need to add some warmth in there, but I'm not going to do that yet. Okay?
Okay.
Step 1, done.
Done.
Step 2, we are going to mix our red for our poppy. Now, if you've been painting with us for a while, you probably have other paint colors. You're free to use just red or rose red. If you don't have those, you can mix red. Even though red is a primary color, if you mix together like magenta and yellow, you get red, which is why printers use the CMYK, right? Because you can get all, like, so many different colors that way. So,
All of them.
all of them. I do want to read the paragraph
Okay.
from The Wizard of Oz. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Which is what this painting is based off of. They now came upon more and more of the big scarlet poppies and fewer of the other flowers, and soon they found themselves in the midst of a great meadow of poppies. Now it is well known that when there are many of these flowers together, their odor is so powerful that anyone who breathes it falls asleep, and if the sleeper is not carried away from the scent of the flowers, he sleeps on and on forever. But Dorothy did not know this, nor could she get away from the bright red flowers that were everywhere about, so presently her eyes grew heavy, and she felt she must sit down and rest to sleep.
Oh, snap. That's a great passage.
Isn't that nice?
I do not remember that from Wizard of Oz.
Really?
Really.
You really don't?
No.
That was one of the most, like, that scene was probably what I remember.
I remember the monkeys,
Yeah.
and that's it.
That one I think I shut out. That freaked me out when I was younger. So to mix our red poppies, we are going to grab our fuchsia and a tiny bit of yellow. And then you can just test that color on a scratch paper to make sure it's red. But there it is, red.
Wow.
Yep.
Magic.
I'm going to actually pour a little bit more fuchsia so I know that I have plenty for this. Now, it's funny because for me, so I saw the movie The Wizard of Oz first, and then I read the book when I was younger, and it was the first time that I truly recognized a change in, like, I didn't know that movies could be different than books. So when I read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, it's different than the movie, and I was just like, what? That's a thing? And so they're like, in this version, the field mice come and save them, and they have to leave the lion because he's too heavy to carry, and the field mice come back. So it's like a whole new experience.
Whoa.
Yeah.
A whole new world?
And so that's when I was just like, oh, well, I should read books, not just watch the movies because they're different. Okay. Fuchsia, yellow. Make some gorgeous red. Now, when we are doing these poppies and we're trying to communicate depth and space, when something is far away, it gets smaller. And when there's a lot of small things next to each other, they actually just turn into a clump, right? So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do clumps, 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 poppies, okay?
Got it.
So the background ones, the far away ones, you can't really tell that those are poppies, but what's communicating it is the color. So make sure you do it in red. And I'm not going to leave a lot of space for the greenery because I want it to feel like the poppies have taken over, that you can't see the stems, you can't see the leaves. And then when we get closer to our foreground, that's when we kind of start to put those in. And then we're going to paint around our road. And you can use water to help spread some of these out. It's good to have variation in value. And notice that I'm lifting my brush up here and there. I don't want it to just be solid because I want there to be like hints of that there's something off the ground instead of it just being like red ground. But that's up to you. You can almost make it look like a carpet if you want, depending on how like full you want it to feel. And then when I get about midway is where I'm going to lift my brush up more. And I'm doing horizontal strokes. And sometimes what I like to do is do it just using mostly water, and then I'll go in with some color and just kind of drop it in. So then we get like some bleeding, some texture.
I like watching the shape of the landscape slowly appear.
Yeah, me too. And already I can tell that I did not leave nearly as much white space as I did in my reference. So you can, if you work quickly enough, you can lift some out right away, like just some color. And then mentally I'm telling myself, Sarah, remember to lift your brush. So now I'm kind of just doing dashes and letting them overlap some of them so I still get a lot more white space. And then when I get to like this bottom inch, that is where I'm going to start really focusing on the shape of the flower. So poppies are round. And I'm leaving a white space in the center. You don't have to leave a white space in the center because they have black centers. So black will show up on red, but part of me just does it as a reminder. Like, you need to put centers in these flowers kind of thing. And sometimes they're on their side, so you're only seeing the side of the flower. And we're also leaving the white spaces so we can put little stems and maybe hints of leaves or grass or something too. So at this point, you're like, this doesn't look like a flower field, and I'm just asking you to trust.
Believe in yourself.
And me.
And Sarah.
I only lead you astray when I forget to tell you something until it's too late.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen all the time.
No.
Just sometimes.
Maybe 3 times a year.
Or every other tutorial.
Maybe every month.
And I feel like the shapes that I'm going for, so when you're thinking about poppies, it depends on the type of poppy, right? Like there's many different types. So you guys can choose if you are specific about the type of poppy you want. But some poppies, like most of them are just like these big, like they kind of round up here, but then they have these like tissue paper petals that kind of move around it. And so sometimes they're open, or sometimes it's like the side of it. There's, you know, like there's the side of the poppy. Sometimes they're flat, so if the center is black in the middle here, then it would just kind of like layer around it. Then you could like define the petals. So like these are the different kind of shapes, very loose, that I'm going for. At the very least, you can just do roundish organic shapes. And then when you add a stem and leaves, you're like, oh, a flower. Okay, okay, okay. But trust me, with the yellow brick road, with Emerald City in the background, people are gonna know what it is that you're painting.
Totally.
So don't stress too much. That's why even though in that excerpt that I just read, it doesn't talk about how they can even see the city from there or anything like that. But these are context clues that we can give our viewers what it is that we're painting, even if it's not entirely accurate. And we have that right as a creative, as a maker, to make the world that we want it to be. And then I kind of want, like, I was thinking about almost like I wanted to communicate the feeling of the overpowering feeling of the flower. So not only do these flowers stretch on for miles and miles and miles, but I wanted it to feel all-encompassing, like they're big. So the ones that are closest to us in our foreground in this bottom left-hand corner, those ones are large, almost like they're the size of our head almost, you know what I mean? And that is just to kind of really communicate that feeling of you are, these poppies will overpower you. Even though there's nothing in the text to describe that these poppies are as tall as, it's not Alice in Wonderland, you know, but we can use things like that as tools to communicate what it is that we're trying to say.
And it definitely overpowered Dorothy.
Yeah.
Made her pass right out.
Right out. So I'm kind of doing these big poppy shapes. They can overlap the road a little bit. If anything, we want it to meet up to that yellow line. We don't want any white space between the poppy and the road to be like this overgrown like area that we're going for. Okay.
Do you know the poppy is a symbol of remembrance?
I did know that.
I did not know that.
Have you ever been to the World War I Museum in Kansas City?
Only at night.
They have a poppy field in the entrance.
Really?
Yeah, it's underneath. You walk across this bridge, and then underneath is a poppy field. And it's really beautiful. It's not real. They're not real flowers. But, yeah, poppies are for remembrance. So they have that. Cool. It's beautiful. It's an excellent museum if you guys are ever in Kansas City. It's the World War I Museum.
I've heard it's great.
It's great.
I've never been. I just know that that's where I've been there to watch fireworks.
Oh, you've got to go inside. It's not a huge museum either, which I appreciate. I mean, like art museums I can spend all day in, but like other types of museums,
I have limited attention span at museums.
Get overwhelmed quickly, but that one, it's really powerful and it's just really well done, Keenan. You really should take the time to go see it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we got the right-hand side. Now we're gonna move on to the right-hand side, and it's essentially that same thing. And the reason why I like to break up the sides like this is because if there's anything I learn from the first side, then I can apply that to the second side. What I need to remember is to lift my brush a little bit more when I get to the mid-ground, right? Because I didn't do that as well on this one. And that's fine. You never like then say, oh, this was a waste or, you know, that's not how it works. But you can still learn as you paint.
Did you know that poppies grew where what's the word? I just forgot the word. Rubble was? In wartime? Wherever there was rubble, poppies would grow there.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So now I'm wondering if that's why they're the flower of remembrance.
I mean, that makes sense.
Because I think the American Legion hands those out every time I go to Walmart.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess if you donate money. $1. $1. Poppies are gorgeous.
Yeah, they're
Lots
one of my
of history.
favorite flowers to paint too. I mean, we're just doing small ones here, but big ones, oh, they're so fun. Okay, so larger poppies, lifting my brush more. Just kind of defining around the road as well. Okay, that feels better. And I actually want to make this higher. Why? It just feels right. Okay. So that's looking good. You can always like add other layers, right? If you use water to spread it, maybe some of your values got too light and you want to kind of really enhance that color. You can do as many washes as your heart desires. It's totally up to you. Okay. Now I'm going to put a little bit of green in my poppy field. So I'm gonna take my pine green, which is actually like has really strong blue undertones, and I wanna warm it up. So I'm gonna add some deep yellow to this green. So let me put this closer. So I did a swoop of pine, a swoop of yellow, and that's gonna make a very vibrant green. If you wanna desaturate that green, you can add a tiny bit of this red to it. And that will tone it down. If you want to tone it down, you don't have to. And then kind of here where there's just like not a lot of space, you can just put little green areas where it's just like, oh, there is green underneath here, you know? So let me acknowledge that. And then what I like to do to help it feel a little bit more full is I then rinse my brush and kind of smear the green around. And it might mix a little bit with the red, that's okay. Kind of smearing it in those places just to like fill the gaps to make it feel more filled. But you want to do this in like the more, either the white sections or the light value red sections, so then the green actually pops. Because when you mix green and red together, they're complementary colors, so they will turn a muddy color. But if you do it in the light white areas, then they'll stay green. You know what I mean?
You know what I mean?
And I wanted a little bit more warmth to my green, so I'm adding a tiny bit of yellow. Okay. And then as we get to more our foreground here, that's when we can be like, oh, here's a stem, here's some leaves. And remember, there's so much and it's so cluttered that you don't have to follow every single piece through. Does that make sense? You can just give like, here's green hint, and that is enough. You don't have to be like, where is the base of this? And does it go, you know what I mean? Because they're just layered on top of each other so much.
No need to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
As they say.
As they say. The biggest thing though is we don't want too much of the white space, because too much white space will kind of distract from our overwhelming poppy field feel. So maybe a little 7, we could do the same thing on the other side. I will say that I like that I left more white space on my left-hand side than the right-hand side. And it's okay. It's okay to look at your painting and say, I learned from this side, I moved it over to this side, and I'm happier with that, because odds are this is not going to be the only flower field that you paint. Like, you know what I mean? Everything is just information that you can later utilize if you don't even want to paint it again. Sometimes I don't love painting things over and over again. So I kind of more like, okay, lesson learned, moved on, and I just paint something totally different. But every lesson that you learn informs whatever you're going to paint next, even if it's a different subject, you know, all of that kind of thing. I guess it's because I try not to, even with these projects, I try not to focus on perfection, because one, I don't actually think that's achievable. And two, I don't want you guys to think that that's why you paint. And I have to follow that rule. If I want you to believe it, I have to believe it too. So then it's just like I paint a project, and if I feel like it's communicating, if I can effectively teach it, you know what I mean? If it's doing what it needs to do, then that is enough. And I have to be okay with that. And it's really easy to get lost in like trying to perfect something so much. Like I could do this field 30 times and probably still feel like there's something that I can adjust to make it better. But then what is that teaching you? Is like, that's only teaching you that something is valuable if it's perfect at the end, or you have to do something over and over to get it right. And I don't want that to be the lesson. I want the joy of creating something while teaching you technique along the way, because that joy is what carries your creative path, not perfection, not expectation. So allow yourself that same grace of, you don't have to do it perfectly every time. You don't have to redo projects. But if you want to, you totally can. Some people really love doing that, and I think that's great. Okay. That feels pretty good. I'm going to do a little bit of a smearing over here just to kind of fill in some of that white. Okay, and we're going to leave that. Feels good. If you have bleed proof white, you can go back in and put in some white sections here if it's really bothering you, if you really were like, dang, I really miss the white spaces. Well, go ahead and put some back in. Okay.
Yeah. Add some more white in there.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm gonna start on the next step, which is our Emerald City. And I'm going to do kind of an Emerald City kind of hill ground because I wanted that to also feel like an all-encompassing section, like a very clear, this is the poppy field, and then it turns into a different countryside kind of thing. But that's up to you. So I'm going to take some of this pine green right here. Let me move it. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. And I'm going to mix just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of yellow in there. But I still want it to stay more that like blue-green color.
I love that blue-green color.
It's good. And my right side is dry. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And then you can just use water to kind of spread it. Now you can see here I got some bleeding right wherever my red. So if you don't want any bleeding, wait until the area the poppy field has completely dried, and then make sure you don't touch it when you add this emerald part. But a little bit of bleeding never bothers me. I actually feel like it's kind of cool.
It is cool.
So that's all, just a hint.
Wow.
Just a hint of emerald. Now, this is what I have found when it comes to painting buildings, which is a skill that I'm still improving on, especially castles. It kind of started with the October Sacred Shadows box where I did that castle. And that castle kind of gave me a run for my money. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, how do I do this? Especially like tiny. I have found that if I use my round 2 brush and actually just start by doing long, thin vertical lines as my towers, it's way easier to make that feel like a thin towering castle than if I start with squares. Does that make sense? Because before, how I would start a castle is I would essentially outline it where I'm like, well, there's a wall and here's a tower with a tower top and there's more wall. And you see how like this kind of feels clunky.
Yeah.
And I wanted something to feel
magical
and like it has finesse and it just, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, and we can practice on a scratch piece of paper if that's helpful. So if I start with my round 2, and if I actually start just by putting in thin lines like this, and then some of the towers are shorter, then I just kind of start connecting them along the base. And maybe some of these towers I thicken at the bottom.
Whoa, cool.
And lead that all the way to the top.
That's how I draw hair.
Yeah?
Yeah, just spiky.
Well, you're doing it right then.
Thank you.
So you see how like that's so much easier to control and it doesn't feel as like heavy. But maybe you want a heavy, thick, walled castle. You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess my point is you can approach painting subjects different ways and they can give you different feelings, and it's just about what is it that you're trying to communicate. So now I have this really pretty spiky castle city, and that for me feels way more realistic than this guy right here.
That looks like what I would draw.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you're like, oh, the structure. Let's start with the structure. So let me outline it and fill it in.
Yeah.
That makes it way thicker than it needs to be.
Yeah.
So
It's just a different style.
it's just different styles. But this one, because it's in the distance, I did want it to feel, I just wanted it to feel not menacing. You know, like thick and chunky feels menacing. I wanted something a little bit like you want to go to that area.
Yeah, magical.
Magical.
I want to visit that place.
Okay, so kind of on the right-hand side where this yellow brick road is leading, kind of right here, I'm going to start by doing my thin lines. And you want to, especially as you get to the top, want to try and keep them straight. So, and and then maybe shorter towers over here. So these are like towers pretty much that I'm starting to put in. I'm pretty much starting from the inside out instead of the outside in. Does that make sense when I say that?
From the inside out? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume if you're, yeah.
Because I'm not outlining it.
Right.
Okay. And then now is where I'm like, okay, where do I want this structure to go? So here's a wall that we can connect. And let's actually like thicken this guy a little bit. We can connect that. Let's thicken the base of that.
Cool.
Connect these. And it's totally up to you where they connect. You can change the shape depending on how like detailed you want to be. Maybe there's little stairs. Maybe you have some gold.
Some castles in Germany just have boulders sticking out of the side of their towers.
Really?
Because they just dug right into it.
Yeah, you could totally do that. I mean, I can't remember the description for Emerald City. I'm not sure if there are some literary context clues that we can use to build this. This one I kind of just had fun with it. I just wanted to paint like a nice thin castle. But bam.
Beautiful.
And then when I get to the bottom, I'm just going to do a few horizontal brush strokes because my ground is horizontal and I wanted it to meld into the ground instead of just being vertical brush strokes on a horizontal background. You know what I mean? I'm like grounding my castle just a little bit.
Yeah, giving it a little connection to the ground.
Yeah. Okay, now I love how that turned out. So fun. It's easy to want to keep messing with it though, and if you want that like really light, skinny finesse feel, try not to do that. Let the thin lines be thin. Okay, now when it comes to the yellow brick road, I want to kind of like really bring back and make it more gold, because right now it's feeling very like highlighter yellow. So I'm going to get some deep yellow. I mixed too much green in mine. So I got my deep yellow. And let's mix a tiny, tiny bit of fuchsia in here. So it gives it like a warmth, a little bit of an orange. And then kind of going along here, along the edges, I can bring in some of that warmth. And actually what I'm going to do, so it doesn't feel disjointed, I'm going to take all of this kind of warm yellow and do another wash on it totally. And then along the edges is where I can take that darker orange.
To make it be more grounded.
Yep. And if you even want, like, I decided not to do like brick textures or anything like that. Because again, I still wanted the focus to be more about poppies and...
And this could be the yellow paved road.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be brick. Well, it's up to you. We are doing it based off of... Okay, and then I'm gonna let that dry, and I think I actually might add a little bit more red on here to adjust the size of the road in this section. And I'm thinning out a tiny, tiny bit. But I wanna wait till that's dry so that paint doesn't go everywhere. Okay. And while we wait for that to dry, I can start putting in some of my poppy centers. So I have black here, I have my round 2. So on these like bigger flowers, you can just add little black centers here and there. Again, you could be at a place where you're like, is that a center of a flower? Is it not? It doesn't matter. Just kind of put it in. And then I like to do little dots around it Just remember that the center of the flowers closest to us are the biggest ones. So that's where our black centers will be the largest. And then as it moves away, the blacks will get smaller. The black circles will get smaller, and eventually we wouldn't be able to see them at all because the flower would be so tiny. So don't do black circles all the way through your field because that will defeat our depth and our illusion that we're trying to create with this space. And then remember, these ones on the left-hand side are the largest ones out of all of them. That feels like a full flower. Maybe there's like a little black peeking out there. It's so funny, I've noticed that like when I'm painting a project, not teaching it, and then when I go to teach it, it's just a different experience. That's why these paintings are so different from each other. And at first, when I was first doing this, it freaked me out. Like I was just like, oh, people are gonna be so mad at me that these flowers look different. You know what I mean? Like I should not be doing this. And it's just because we're using different parts of our brain. Teaching and talking is like a different part of your brain than painting.
So true.
So like doing both simultaneously, of course you're gonna get different results. And to that I say, that's okay. You following along and painting me is using different parts of your brain than if you were just painting on your own. And I'm not saying good, bad, I'm just acknowledging. That's why you get different results in different spaces and scenarios. Okay, so for these poppies over here, I'm gonna do some thin like detail lines using my tooth. So if this is my example flower, you can use your round tooth to kind of shape the petal. And then if you wanna do like little thin lines towards the center and give your poppy petals a little bit of shape. Can they see that on the close-up?
It's a little to, yeah, there you go.
Okay. So think of it more like, I'll do it big. So if our poppy petal, let's say it's shaped like that, okay? And this is the center. Our detail lines are always angled towards the center. So in this direction, they're angled this way, but up here, they're gonna be angled down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And you can do as much or as little as you want. Sometimes just the littlest hint of texture and line and details is just all that we need. So that's what I'm gonna focus on these, where I'm just like, here's a petal. Let's define the line. Let's just do a few. Let's say it's connecting to here. A few details. And then this petal kind of goes up. And this is where your brain has to do a little extra work, right? Because when we put these in, it's not like I was like, there are 4 large flowers and they are all angled this way. We kind of just did blobs. And it's kind of that same game of looking in the clouds and trying to see what animals. It's like that, but flower version, where we're looking at these round, reddish circles and we're like, where is there a petal? Let's make one. Is there one that we can see already, or do we need to just create one? And that's kind of fun, I think.
I actually really loved your hollow example.
My what?
I don't know what else to call it.
Okay. What is it?
Your example for us, for where the folds of the flower are.
Oh.
I actually loved it being,
This one?
yeah, empty.
Yeah, it makes it easier to see.
It's so cool.
So if you want those, like these were a little bit lighter value. So when I do detail lines on them, they're showing up.
Yeah.
If your red is so dark that when you try and do these detail lines, they don't show up, then just mix like a tiny, tiny bit of black or green in there to make a darker value. So then they will show up. But the gentlest hand, okay, we want these to be really thin lines, thin details. And then, of course, as we go back into space, our poppies, we won't be able to see detail lines, right? So it's really just like this foreground that we're working on here. If you want to shape some of these flowers in this midground, you can. Like just do. And then I'm going to take that red and kind of thin out this road like I said I would. Because we want that depth to be gradually get smaller. Now I will say this is a flower field, so it's fair to say that there might be some unevenness on the road if there's like a very particularly strong outcropping of poppies going over it. So don't stress if your road isn't perfectly smooth. It's a wild field of flowers, you know? Okay, can we go to that overhead again? And look at that. We got a poppy field. I feel like I need to thin out, break that line up, and maybe...
A poppin' field.
That was good.
Thank you.
That was good. Okay. This one feels way more dense than this one, which I actually kind of like. Like this feels like a carpet of flowers, right? Mm. I didn't leave as much breathing space in between, but that's okay. You guys can see the difference between the two. Now, when it comes to this little ring that we have going on here.
So curious about that.
I need a clean jar. Can you hand me that jar?
The one that's full of things?
Yeah, just dump it out.
Yeah.
Great. So you guys can take any circle thing. I'm looking at the opening of this jar, and I'm just gonna see how it fits over. Is that too big? I wonder if there's one that I can find that's a little bit smaller. And this is where I just kind of, I just look around my studio and I'm like, what is a round, smallish, smaller thing? The paint doesn't have a ridge. Let's find something. Kaylin, let's go on the hunt.
2 hours later.
Okay, so I just walked around my studio really quick and grabbed various circular shapes, but I want to make sure it's a thin line. Okay, so like a roll of tape like this wouldn't work because if I paint this yellow and I stamp it, then it's just going to create like a thick line. So you want to look at something that has an edge. So I have a few different things here. I have a roll of tape that's just about out. Okay, and you can hold it up and you can decide that seems too small to me. Right?
Yeah, agreed.
So then I got a lid here for my bleed proof white. That seems better. At least it covers the whole castle, but what I don't love that it rounds like that.
Yeah.
I want it to feel more like a arch. So then I have from here some pigment. Because once upon a time I played with making my own watercolor paints.
Oh.
Just be careful if you have pigments around that you're not ingesting the powder. That feels...
Oh, that's nice.
I'm like Goldilocks. That one's just right.
Just right.
And then what I like to do is I like to test it. So I'm going to take this, and you can use whatever paintbrush you want. It doesn't really matter. And you're going to paint the edge here.
Oh, so you're telling me Goldilocks didn't love that king-size bed?
Nope, too big.
Shocking.
And then, let's see. There we go.
Ah.
Now this is like kind of a plastic, so that's why it has these dots.
Oh, the ridges.
The ridges? Is that bad? I don't know. I could connect them.
Could you make it look like it's raining gold dust on the castle?
Like you could like put little...
Yeah, like wherever there's a ridge, it just means
smear
that
it?
circle is falling down.
That's very magical. Can't see it that well, but do we like that idea?
I mean, I think that's a neat idea.
Let's also try this jar.
Whoever came up with it's pretty pretty on top of it.
Super smart.
Super.
Whoever thought of that, so smart.
It's unreal, the amount of smartness.
See how big this jar is. Too big.
Oh, it's too much.
Too strong. Okay, I like the plastic cap. That's what I'm going to go with. And I really like your idea, Keenan.
Thanks.
So I'm going to go with that. If you guys are not as into that, where you just don't love the ridges, one, you can try and trace it too. It's really difficult to keep an even thin line when like tracing something, I have found. So
What about like a stencil?
a stencil would work great, I think.
Like, you need like an inverted stencil.
I wish I can remember what I actually use.
It must have been really good.
I know what it was. It was a coffee cup. I got a to-go coffee from the tea shop.
Oh.
And it was just a little...
We might have hot cocoa cups here.
Really?
Yeah, let me go check.
Okay, Keenan's gonna check.
7 hours later.
Okay, I found a cup, and we're gonna try this one. I'm just gonna do the edge. Dang, I really wish I would have kept that coffee cup. That would have solved all of these problems.
It just means we have to get our own.
That seems like the best one.
Ooh, that's nice.
Okay, so you don't have to paint the whole thing, right? Because that will then go into the poppy field, and I kind of just want it on the top half. So I'm just gonna take my 6, grab the yellow with a little bit of the fuchsia mixed in. Now the funny thing about like stamping and things like this is there's always an element of surprise. So you gotta have like this feeling of acceptance with whatever happens, you know? Because you're like, maybe I accidentally put too much paint there, or maybe it didn't connect. That's okay.
Maybe you put it upside down.
We gotta let it go, and we just
Ooh, here it goes.
go for it. Ta-da!
Bada bing.
That turned out great.
That looks awesome. Wow.
Yeah, this is our paint water cup. I'm honestly not even sure if we still sell these, but we got that.
It was on letsmakeart.com.
It was. Okay,
That looks cool.
I think we are to the point. I'm just gonna like use my brush and kind of where I redid some of the red. It was a little bit darker there, and I kind of just want to smooth out some of those lines. Add a little bit to it.
Red is a
And our
red
little,
is a good color.
it's so good. And our painting is done.
Woo.
And it's so satisfying to peel back the tape.
On the untouched edges.
Look at that clean edge, you guys.
Oh.
Now the bottom one, because the color didn't go all the way, that's okay. Just won't be as satisfying as this edge.
I don't know. I still kind of I like it.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like the painting is alive. That edge is it's a live edge.
Yes. Okay, there we did. There we did.
There we did.
We did it. We painted a red poppy field based and inspired by The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was a book that I enjoyed reading in my youth, and of course watching the movie. I hope you had fun painting this project. If anything, I hope you have a little bit more understanding of how to do a flower field, and also paying attention to the different elements inside your painting to communicate to your viewer what you want to. You know, what's the subject? Are you giving it a lot of detail and space? Do you want it to feel heavy or full? Light? Do you want the castle or the city to feel magical and thin? Do you want it to feel heavy and ominous? Like, we can use all of these descriptive words that we can glean from text or even within our mind, and think about, how does that translate to an image? What feelings can we get using different colors, using thin and thick lines, using active mark making or really smooth washes? All of these are tools that we as artists get to use to communicate to our viewer, in the same way that we have these wonderful books that use such descriptive texts. So thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you had a good time. I can't wait to see how your all paintings turn out. If you're on Instagram, you can tag us at Let's Go Make Art. We also have a couple hashtags that you can use, which are found in the description. And if you are on Facebook, you can join our watercolor community there. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. Super big community, but very supportive and kind. And most of the time, they're doing the paintings that you're doing, so you can see how people are approaching the projects and ask for advice, feedback, see what other people are doing and learn from it. It's just a nice community. I think that's all.
You nailed it.
One little shout out, I got this book from the Kansas City Public Library. If you do not utilize your public libraries, please do so. They are wonderful resources.
Serious.
They do so much, not only from an educational standpoint, but from a community outreach standpoint. They are amazing. So support them. Libraries are the best.
I have a library plug.
Yeah, what?
We recently started to go to the library to work from the library. It's nice to have that capability.
Yeah.
But also they have a spot for kids usually.
Yes.
And the kids love to go grab a book, sit down, read a
Yes.
book. They even have like blocks sometimes. Like
They have great games too,
Yes, yep.
like blocks and toys that
Yep.
are help. Anyways,
Libraries.
I love the library so much. Okay, that's all. Have a great day. Goodbye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.